Hello, my name is Dan Ferrisi, Group Editor, Commercial and Security with Emerald, back here with the HDBaseT Alliance at InfoComm 2024. Really excited to be conducting another thought leadership panel with our esteemed guests here. We have, of course, Jeff Hastings from BrightSign, Gabi Shriki from Valens, and we have as well Corey Morelli from HighSecLabs. Thank you for being here today, talking about cybersecurity vulnerabilities and digital signage. Really appreciate all of you taking time to opine on this topic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So let's get right into it. What type of threats exist in the digital signage sphere when it comes to cybersecurity? Can you give us a sense of the landscape of threats that we face?
Absolutely. So there's quite a few threats that you face, and one of the main ones that you're starting to see now is AV is becoming out in digital signage to have the same network connections that it has historically had for computers. So you started seeing a lot of the landscapes being into the MCCS attacks, EDID attacks, IP-based network attacks, and embedded malware attacks as well from your secure supply chain. So some of just a few threat vectors that are in consideration now that weren't previously in consideration 10 years ago.
Yeah, I guess I would look at it as pretty much anything that's happening in the world of cyber attacks is now applying to digital signage. And I think historically, people have thought about digital signage as like, oh, people aren't going to attack that. And actually, it's quite the opposite. I mean, the attacks in digital signage, people from the hacker perspective are pretty excited because they get notoriety for it. All of a sudden, you can turn a big billboard into something. You can actually affect a lot of people and very negative. So I think what's starting to happen is people are realizing like these are all network devices and all the standard network attacks that are out there can be applied to digital signage.
Exactly. I think that the whole purpose of signage is to influence and bring the information to the users, the spectators, and once we have someone hacking that and putting the wrong information, that will have a severe impact. So definitely important.
So given the potential severe impact that you mentioned, Gabi, and the threat landscape that we face, in terms of hardware installation, in terms of device authentication, what are some best practices that we should be aware of, that Integrator should be aware of, to try to mitigate the risk? I mean, I'm sure we can't eliminate it altogether, but how can we significantly mitigate the risk?
All right, so ideally, if you could, we would have done it only with HDBaseT, so there is no way to penetrate it from the outside world, right? We are a point-to-point, no network access, no vulnerability in terms of someone trying to hack it. So if you have an installation that is small enough that can be done with HDBaseT, you are all set. But some of the installation requires to be part of a larger network. And this is where Jeff and Colin here should weigh in.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think from BrightSign's perspective, what we really focus on is the device itself. So, like the HighSec folks that, they're really focused on a lot of networking, how to get a secure network transmission into our box. We then take the content, secure it on the player, and then make sure that we have security going out. Now, most of our connections are HDMI, but we feed into HDBaseT. Most of the time, it's HDCP connected, so we have security on the output side, allowing them to keep it encrypted. We also very much focus on the device itself. If you look at a lot of vulnerabilities on the device itself, it's kind of a classic computer vulnerabilities. One of the things that we do on our BrightSign box, it's a single application. The operating system is signed, and the only application that runs on that is signed. So we eliminate a lot of the vulnerabilities that exist in standard computers, like an operating system that can run any application, like Windows and Android. Anything that allows multiple applications is an attack vector to get another application running on it. With our device, it only runs our application. So we can have content, we can take encrypted content down, but only our application runs on the device, which makes it incredibly secure because you can't get any malware on it. There's nowhere to get malware on it because everything's encrypted. We only run the signed versions of our application. So keeping the box super secure has been what we've been focused on for a long time. And then we rely on other ecosystem partners like the networking side, like the distribution side of the video to keep it secure after that.
Corey, best practices?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the best practices that you can do is actually unidirectional data flow. So you don't have two-way communications between endpoints and networks, and then network segmentation, right? So you keep your systems separate. And most of what HighSecLabs does is secure unidirectional data flow via optical data diodes, which is typically controlled under an NSA standard, and it's TAA/BAA compliance. So another thing that you're going to do is securing your supply chain. Right, so you trust your hardware manufacturers, you trust the vendors that you use, like HDBaseT, like Valens, like BrightSign. Bring in vendors that are ISO 9001 certified, things of those nature that give you better accreditation and build a trust of your supply chain.
Right. I think that important is that if you're an integrator out there that looks to do that, look for a credible vendor. Look for someone who knows the guts of these things. So don't buy off-the-shelf product and hope for the best. Make sure you choose the right vendors.
Yeah, we see a lot of that. People sourcing stuff, whether it's, especially in the media player market, we just went and bought a cheap Android device from China. It's like, you have no idea clearly no idea what was inside that box. And they deploy them, and then, they have security vulnerabilities, and they wonder why. It's very simple, because you to your point, you want to know your supply chain, you want to know your vendors, and you want to make sure that the product that you're actually acquiring is not going to be vulnerable. And if you buy stuff, you can go to Alibaba and buy a player for $49. Well, you're going to get a $49 experience.
Yeah, it's also going to have embedded memory controllers nowadays, which is not something that we saw in the past. It used to be double EEPROM. Now things actually have a lot more memory capacity, and so you can send, if you're not using one-way data flow, you can send back commands from the display itself to start logging in the EDID data, and can transmit out what you're seeing on the screen to a remote user, and they can send information back so you can hack the system that it's connected to. So there's a lot of security that's coming out that is going to be necessary to truly secure digital signage.
It's really unfortunate we live in the kind of world we do, where we have to think about things like man-in-the-middle attacks, and there's so many challenges to have just, faithful, secure transmission of content. I know you mentioned, Gabi, with HDBaseT, you can avoid the network altogether, have that totally secure point-to-point. But any closing thoughts about secure transmission of data where the network is involved, or has to be involved? Any closing thoughts as we think about man-in-the-middle attacks and all these other threat vectors that we now need to worry about in the digital signage sphere?
Well, one of the things that we do is, like I said, we rely on ecosystem partners to get the data to the box. But even once you get that transmission, if, the man-in-the-middle attack can actually take that data and, potentially the content could be morphed in the middle, right? You not know that. So using the secure transmission is important. What we also do is work with folks to make sure it's encrypted on the front end, it's securely transmitted, it's encrypted at rest on our player, and then we will actually use encryption methods to validate that content is actually the content that was set down. So having it encrypted throughout the process and encrypted at rest, and then we basically use the same encryption, the decryption algorithm on the box to make sure that it actually does match what was sent. So there's a lot of places it can happen, but you can attack content kind of anywhere these days.
All right. I think that people need to put security from the get-go, from the inception point of this project. Don't look at it as an afterthought. So when you build a signage solution, either it's a Google campus or one single video wall in a large venue, you need to think about it in advance and have the proper people review the vulnerabilities and make sure you have the right solution for that. When you can influence, minimize the number of points that someone can get in and focus on where there should be a gateway to the world and make sure that one is safe.
Any closing thoughts, Corey?
Yeah, so in addition to what Jeff's talking about in the encryption, where you have your typical AES 256 or 8021X for your encryption standards, what you can do on the other end is take a double EEPROM, and then you can actually emulate your data. So you can have an emulator inside of there, which is where our products kind of come in to help have an extra layer of added security so that it's truly never connected. In the event that you do have network segment, you have to segment your network. So your IP-based are not connected to your home network. So if they hack your AV network still has your encryption on the other end from that side, and it also has an embedded memory controller that's emulating. So you don't actually have that layer of security that isn't there, right? So you're never actually connected when they do get into things that may be vulnerable.
Well, thank you so much, Corey Morelli from HighSecLabs, Gabi Shriki from Valens, and Jeff Hastings from BrightSign for joining me today, talking about these challenges in cybersecurity related to digital signage, but also some potential solutions.